You're going to measure the health of your pipeline. You've got to measure that in the context of the health of your system.
Designing a pipeline was to say, try and look at it from the perspective of what's happening with the customer.
Do you have stages in your pipeline which are holding stages?
The goal here is to be able to talk about these things almost fluently and know your data intimately.
What was the weighted value of the whole pipeline on the 1st of last month?
Yeah.
What was it on the 1st of this month? What's the difference?
Go.
Here we go. Normally you wait for me to say something to start.
It's like,
We're starting.
Starting.
What have you got?
What have I got? What's been going on? Fire pit area. Talked about
Yeah,
that.
festoon lighting.
Festoon lighting. Well,
Oh, you're going to do the storytelling?
Storytelling. It's beginning. It's a bit of a process.
Yeah.
It's
Digital free. Wi-Fi is turned off.
I think tonight could be a turning point.
Well, it's lovely warm weather.
It's warm weather, but I've also been given a rotisserie adaptation for my fire pit.
Has it been someone's birthday recently?
It may have been. And so, yeah, I've got 2 chickens that I've purchased from the local market in the fridge waiting. And
ready to be rotisserie.
Yeah. So
how many people are you cooking? 2 chickens on a rotisserie? You did say you were going to invite all the children in the street, remember?
2 chickens by the time.
You know, the Buckle family got quite a healthy appetite.
There'll be some leftovers.
Well, it'll be breakfast.
Well, we'll see who comes. We might have some people, but yeah, I'm more intrigued. Maybe I'm thinking first run, I don't invite people.
I might pop in.
Just to see
I know where you live. If I smell the aroma of roast chicken.
Yeah, maybe do that first, and then see whether there's some raw chicken.
Carry on to the...
just cut into it.
Yeah.
But no, so yeah.
So proper testing. Last night, though, I was sat out in my outside area with the festoon lighting. And I thought of you. I thought, there you go.
Festoon lighting is the way to go.
That's the way to go. You got it this time of year, though. You got to wait till it's late enough.
Yeah, it's quite late, isn't it? Before it really
not much point putting it on when it's broad daylight.
But yeah, so we'll see how it goes. The adventure of
what about the storytelling bit?
Oldie-fashioned.
Yeah.
Oh well, this so I don't think I've even told you this. So as viewers or listeners may know, I grew up in Papua New Guinea.
It has been mentioned.
And my mum sent me a memory stick the other day, and on it was about 300 pages of typed up Word document, but she's transcribed all of the letters that she wrote to my gran from 1989 to 1993.
Wow.
And then put photos in between. Yeah. So I'm up to about 1991 at the moment as I'm reading
you've got
through
a sort of full history
of what I was doing as a child. And it's really interesting.
Sounds amazing.
It's really interesting.
So that's going to be great for storytelling.
Exactly.
That's story fodder.
And so, yeah, Ethan said, I didn't know you had all this lore, Dad. Everything's about lore now with Gen Z, L-O-R-E.
Lore.
So lore. Folklore, folk history.
Right.
Because you never told us all this.
Yeah.
Well, it's coming back to me. I feel like I'm, So that might form part of the.
See, already you've got him on a hook.
Yeah.
He wants to know what happens next.
Wants to know. So look where I used to live.
Yeah.
Well. You don't know how good you got it, son.
You got TV and everything.
Exactly.
Excellent. Okay, then. Well, I am looking forward to reports on the storytelling, the festoon lighting, the new rotisserie, the chickens, obviously, and whether the fire keeps going.
Yeah.
The weather will hold. It's going to be hot. Hot.
Well, I think it's raining at the moment, actually.
You're a ray of sunshine,
it might actually, yeah. But that won't stop me with the rotisserie.
Well, it'll presumably just be one of these hot weather day little thunderstorms pass over.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay.
Anyway, so there we go.
Right, well, that's set us up nicely. I'm got quite hungry now just listening to your story with the rotisserie chickens. We better get on and talk about something that's maybe slightly more serious. Let's do a podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. And with me, as ever, is Rich Buckle.
Hello.
My partner in crime, and I'm Dave Parry. We could have almost recorded that bit. I say exactly the same words every week, didn't I? But no, folks, it is...
Well, I was going to say as well, I just need to correct you there. I'm not sure there is anything more serious than rotisserie chicken.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway.
Possibly slipped up there.
Tis not the theme of this podcast.
No, the theme of this podcast, and we keep trying to pretend that people don't know what's coming, but they've all read the title on the list of podcasts to watch. We're talking about your pipeline, and we do mean this in a CRM sense. We're not into the plumbing here.
Yeah.
We can't fix your central heating folks. Although I do need a good plumber if anyone's out there. Fix one. My Y valve's broken again. Pipeline. How healthy is my pipeline? Talking from a CRM point of view. That's what today is all about, and we'll tell you in a minute how that came about. But pray tell, Mr. Buckle, how have we got here? What were our most recent podcasts on our journey?
Episode 126, the ever increasingly topical, what happens if the internet goes out and could you run your business?
Yes. And the day we recorded that, Google had a massive outage and Spotify and God knows what else all stopped working.
Ahead of a time.
See, we just knew.
Ahead of a time.
And also since then, we've made sure that we've got a proper synchronized store for all of our critical files. And we've looked at the ISO 27001 standards to have a good set of policies.
And what was that? Were you in that meeting where someone was talking about stopping missiles landing on the building?
Yes, who was that? Yeah, that was Pete. He was working with a client and they needed a policy for their missile defences. And that made me think of you digging up out of our insurance renewal that we were no longer covered for missiles landing. And then he was asked by a client, because the point of that story, diversion folks, was that we were given a list of cybersecurity questions to answer for a tender we're applying for. We were telling Pete and he said, and I've got to give them my missile defence policy. We thought he was having us on, but he wasn't. No. Deadly serious is our Pete.
If anybody has got one of those, feel free to write in. We could do with
one of those to put into our list of templates. We could put it on the website. Yeah. People can download it. There's going to be a rush on those. Missile defence policy. Shouldn't joke. By the time this goes out.
Well, exactly. It might be sticks and stones. Anyway.
So that was what?
That was 126. So what happens if the internet goes out? Could your business survive? 125 is almost the opposite of that, and it was about data connections.
Yes. Assuming the internet hasn't gone out, we're now going to use it to within an inch of its life.
That was inspired by HubSpot releasing a data connector for ChatGPT.
They have.
So there's lots of
and as they're trumpeting, the only CRM to have so far done so, and therefore the first. And it's quite interesting. A little footnote to that, though, having played around with it quite a lot, is it is amazing. It really is. But the team edition of ChatGPT lets you do a maximum of 10 deep research inquiries per month.
Oh, okay. So
that's a bit of a buzzkill. It was me showing off to all our clients how I could use this and blah, look at what I can do. Yeah. And after I'd done with 10, it says you now got to wait till July the 11th before you can have another go.
If anyone hasn't seen it, book in.
Yeah.
And then 124 was David Ventura.
Exactly. That was about customers, listening to customers, key account management, giving them the red carpet treatment.
Yep.
And there's some good chats in there, I must admit, and good comments on LinkedIn for those of you that saw both David and my post on that. So thank you very much. So if that was 126, 125, 124, that must mean that we're at 127 today.
127.
Which will be a dart finish.
Yeah. Look at that.
Any idea? 17, bullseye. No, you can't do that. You've got to finish on a double, haven't you? It's
40. We really need to work this out beforehand and then appear like we know what we're doing with darts. 999 brings you down to 100, so then it's easy. Yeah, okay.
20 double top.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's 1,000,001 other combinations. Test us out. You're right. That would be one day we'll actually prepare for that. So 127, episode 127, and we're talking about how healthy is my pipeline. Now, can you remember where this subject cropped up? I think it was I not on a trip with Rob? If you're listening, Rob, I think I was on a trip with you. We went to go and see a company that's an acquisition target or potential acquisition target. And we were mulling over what would go into the due diligence section on sales pipelines.
Yes.
And it made me think, you don't have to wait until you're either the target of or the predator of an acquisition. Surely whatever's appropriate in that process should be what you would be measuring anyway.
Yeah.
So we decided to call this one, How Healthy is My Pipeline? Just so you've got a good set of measures for your sales pipeline. So that's where this subject came from.
I've got another sales-related thing, but it's sort of aligned, but not really. But I'm just going to throw it out there.
Just go on, see how it flies. Fly a kite.
Well, it does it back flying. So I was watching a Rory Sutherland clip, who I've mentioned before on this podcast, and he was talking about bees, and he was talking about only 80% of honeybees do the waggle dance, 20% don't. Right, so 20% of bees apparently just go out randomly. They're not following anyone else. It's randomly going out.
And the 20% do that.
20%, and occasionally some of them come back with a jackpot, and some don't.
The rest must just die on the journey. Right?
So or they come back with nothing, or they, there's no waggle when they return. And it got me thinking about that. I thought, has anyone ever applied that to sales?
What, 20% of your sales force?
Well, yeah, well, just that whole theory of like, okay, you've got a lot of process, and we're talking about process today and measures and all of that. But what about the 20% where you just go off and
do random stuff
and see what happens? And
stand in the high street, say, anybody want to buy some HubSpot?
Not quite that random.
Well, you said random, right?
Yeah, but that sort of thing. I thought that's another podcast. I thought I'd mention it.
I think you need to do a little case study.
Yeah.
I think you test something random.
Yeah.
And see if it works.
Yeah.
Well, there was always that McKinsey study about marketing, wasn't there?
Marketing,
Do 30% of new stuff that you don't know if it's going to produce a return, and 70% of stuff that produces a return.
So I did Google it to see whether or not there's been any academic research done on the impact of.
You didn't check
bees.
GPT it?
No, I was in a rush, so I just
Okay.
I've got time for dialogue with it. But there's not a lot on it really. So I thought, well, we could break new ground here. How bees, the waggle.
Did you research the bees' behaviour or the potential crossover to sales behaviour?
Crossover and a bit of the bees' behaviour. So there's only honeybees that do the waggle dance. Which, I thought it was all bees, but apparently not. It's only honeybees.
Right.
And how long they waggle for every second is a kilometre.
Right.
So there's an awful lot. You could, we're talking about measures and pipeline. There's an awful lot of measures in the waggle dance,
Right.
but only 80% do it. Anyway, we're going off topic.
That is rather, isn't it?
But I thought there's something. There's a little interesting podcast in that.
Let's leave that one.
So
You've triggered me to think about bees now, and my great conversation starter: are there more bees on the planet or stars in our galaxy?
Ooh.
I'm going to leave that one hanging. Answer next week, folks. Either way, there's a lot of both. The question is, which one is there more of?
Does the main question, does that ever start conversans, or do people just look at you and walk off?
Usually, even if they don't walk off, they're sat there thinking about it. It's not very good for the conversation. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, good point. Good challenge. So back to where we
pipelines.
Were. Pipelines. How healthy is my pipeline? And thinking about this, I hadn't really realised that the first one has got nothing to do with just pipelines. It's much broader, which is data hygiene. Because if your data is rubbish, your measures of your data health, your pipeline health, will be a little rubbish anyway.
Yeah.
The whole garbage in, garbage out thing.
Exactly.
So the first thing we said is if you're going to measure the health of your pipeline, you've got to measure that in the context of the health of your system. And have you got good data hygiene? So is your data complete? Have the things that you're supposed to be collecting all been collected? So have all your contacts got an email and they're all attached to a company and all that sort of stuff? Have all your deals got a value or a close date? Those types of things. So data hygiene is the first one, and that seems reasonable. We do a housekeeping dashboard, don't we? We don't call it a hygiene dashboard.
I've actually been thinking about that today. So
you've been busy. That's two things you've been thinking about: waggle dances, and data hygiene.
Data hygiene, and just had to think about it a little bit differently.
Right. What were you thinking about today for them?
Because I looked at ours and thought I can't. It's all good, but there's other questions I was asking. And
so we're going to improve our own housekeeping dashboard.
I wanted to make it more about the questions you're asking, which is a bit more almost due diligence.
Yeah.
Than just functional, have we got these properties updated?
Nice. And we're getting Gary to work on a bit of a display at the moment with red and green lights on, aren't we, to build into the dashboard. So more to come on that one. So first off, make sure your data is right. And then if there was one measure then, so once you got that, one measure, I couldn't quite come to a decision myself, actually, looking down the ones I've written down on my piece of paper here. If I could only have one measure, what would that one measure be? What would your vote be? You can see the list in front of you. We don't have to tell everybody everything on the list, but if you had to just measure the whole of your pipeline health with a single number.
Not sales health, pipeline health.
Pipeline health, yeah.
Distinction.
So sales will be more an order book thing.
Yeah.
So once you've received the orders, have I got enough orders to satisfy my annual sales target?
I don't know, maybe pipeline cover, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure you can boil it down to one measure. I don't think.
This is back to the one thing.
I think this is the problem.
Yeah, I think it's a toss-up between pipeline cover and some version of sales velocity.
That's what I was going to say. That was going to be my second one.
Yeah. Well, there we go. We're talking on the same thing. So let's talk about pipeline cover. Now, the simple version of pipeline cover, and as friends of ours will know, we don't do anything simple if we can possibly make it complicated. Not always true. Pipeline cover, if you want a nice simple version, is just add up the value of your pipeline Don't weight it, just total value. And that needs to be some multiple of your sales target. And conventional wisdom says 3 to 5 times.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that is flawed for me on so many levels, but it is universally. If you Google it, that's the answer you'll get. You need an unweighted total pipeline value of 3 to 5 times your sales target. And the main flaw I see with that is, where has it taken into account the time to close a deal?
Yeah.
Because if it takes a day to close a deal, you need a lot of them, right? You need your pipeline. Let's say your annual target is 10 million quid. If you got 10 million quid in your pipeline, that's great if it takes a year to close a deal. If it takes a day to close a deal, then you don't need that anymore. You need 100 grand, right?
Yeah.
Because you got 365 divided into it. You know what I mean? You need a smaller number. If it takes you 10 years to close a deal, you need a lot of them.
Yeah.
So the fact that pipeline cover through to that simple measure misses the point about time to close bothered me a lot. So the version we use ourselves now and that we're putting into clients is more of a formula, which takes the weighted pipeline value, not the total, and it multiplies it by the factor of how many times your deal close time, your average deal close time, fits into a year.
Yeah.
So simple worked example for people listening without needing a pen and paper. If it took 6 months to close a deal, you're going to churn your pipeline twice a year. So your pipeline value weighted only has to be half your target.
Yeah.
Because you're going to churn it twice. So if you've got a £10 million target, you need 5 million of weighted value in your pipeline if your average time to close is 6 months. So that's the way we do it on pipeline cover. So instead of having the 3 to 5 number, which you could argue, what should that be, 10 or 4 or whatever, use your actual close rates. And that's what your weighted pipeline's coming down to, isn't it? So I know that's made it a bit complicated for people, and I'm sorry about that, but if you're going to have a measure that's that important, you've got to get it right. So I would want to know where 100% is my cutoff. Have I got enough stuff in my pipeline compared to what I should have if I'm going to keep this show on the road?
Yeah.
And that's where I think pipeline cover sort of hits it for me.
Well, I think as well, if you're using it without a weighted forecast, and we have a variant on weighted forecast as well, don't we, into the deal probabilities?
Yeah.
Because if a lot of people will weight their forecasts or their pipelines, if you get to a 90% contract sent stage in your pipeline, you could be the only horse in the race, or there could be 3 or 4 horses in the race. Yeah. In which case, is 90% really an accurate measure of what's in the pipeline? And so
I was in this discussion yesterday, deep into it. Matt, you were there. I was talking to Matt about it. How can it be that you've got so many salespeople marking their deals as 75% chance of winning when you don't even know if the project's going to go ahead and there's another supplier still in the race? 75% is not quite nailed on, but it's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're going to win 3 out of 4 of those, given that probably 1 in 4 don't proceed,
don't happen.
It means you've got to be the only horse left running the race. But then the weighted bit that you made the point of generally, in terms of that, how you weight it, which measure you use, we've got the choice really, because some pipelines have a different percentage probability based on where they are through the pipeline. So you're at stage 1, opportunity identified, maybe we're at 10%, then we've done a bit of qualification, you're at 20%, then we've done a bit of solution design, then we've done a quote and blah, 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 and just goes up as you go through. It's a bit too linear, straight line, isn't it really? Yeah. Doesn't give you much room for nuance. So the question that's paired with that, and it's another measure which I think is a partner measure, is forecast accuracy. So how many of your 50% rated deals did you win? Yeah. And it's probably not 50%, but if it's close to it, you're okay. Yeah. But if it's a mile away, then what do you do about that? Retrain your sales force or apply a factor because they're over optimistic? So there's a whole load in pipeline cover there. Contact us if you want more details. But if I were you, I'd go back to that weighted value of your pipeline, factor it by how many times your average deal to close fits into a year, and then express that as a percentage of your sales target. Yeah. And if you're over 100%, you're tickety-boo. You can keep going. Yeah. So that's the pipeline cover. So the other one then that vied for position in our top 1, if we had top 2, it would have been sales velocity. Remember we got all into sales velocity a few months ago? We did. It's a standard report, isn't it, at HubSpot? And once again, it's kind of a bit flawed the way it's produced. Sorry, HubSpot people, but it's close but no cigar. I think it sort of does it. It takes the total number of deals, multiplies it by the average value of the deals, multiplies it by the average win rate, divides it then by the average time to close the deal. And in theory, it gives you the amount of deal you're winning every day, even if you don't actually win it every day. So if you win £365,000 worth of orders a year, you're winning £1,000 a day.
Okay.
It's trying to boil it down to that. It's sort of flawed because it allows you to change the period which you average it over, which unfortunately also brings in more deals and it breaks the formula.
Yeah.
So no longer is it expressed as a per day, and then you get into this whole argument. Oh well, it's a relative measure, not an absolute measure. And
comparative, and
all that.
just use it to compare salespeople. And
So it got us to thinking, and we've come up with this other one which we don't call sales velocity, we call it value add, and this is is either very easy to understand, especially if you're from a manufacturing environment, or it's a bit of a conceptual leap. But for those of you in manufacturing or are familiar with the sort of accounts that you produce where you have the notion of stock and there's a stock change month to month, then it falls out and it's quite easy. So the fact that you've got your order intake target hit in the month, on first glance, is good news, right? You've hit your order intake target. Great, get the commission, ring the bell, go for a pint. But if you've done that by only selling what was in your pipeline without replacing it, you've just reduced the value of your pipeline, and actually it's not been such a good month. All you've done is sold from stock, as the manufacturer would say, sold the family silver without replacing it. So this concept of the value-added measure adds two things together. It adds the value of the orders that you've won. Okay, that's a good start. But then the other one takes a bit of thinking about, because you've got to take a comparison of 1 month to the next month. So our systems now are all recording a snapshot on the first day of every month. And it records what was the weighted value of the whole pipeline on the first of last month. What was it on the first of this month? What's the difference? And the change is added to this value of orders won. So once again, I know this is all a bit complicated. You've got to get your head around it, but this is actually quite a complicated area. And that's why not many people have done it properly in the past.
Well, we've always done a bit of this with WIP input values with professional services as well.
Probably it was that experience probably that informed this way of thinking.
Yeah, just so that you don't beat people up unnecessarily, but also it's useful to know whether or not, like you say, you're just bleeding down your WIP and your stock, or your deals.
Or the other way around, like you say, you're adding lots. Because another thing that strikes me as odd in businesses is that there's this, I think largely fallacy view that the more you bother a customer, the more likely you are to win the deal. And I'm not sure I've ever been on the receiving end and it felt it that way. They've now rung me 10 times in the last 3 days. I better place the order. If anything, it's the opposite. So I'm not sure if the idea of beating salespeople up to say, get the orders in, and their reaction is to bring up all the people with quotes that they rang yesterday, is really going to change the future very much. So this idea of work at other parts of the pipeline, choose something in the middle of the pipeline and move that on a stage, or find some new deals to put in at the beginning, or find a deal that's already live and upsell it a bit, increase the value of that so that you can add more value. That would all then be reflected in this measure. So there you go. We could almost stop the episode here. You've got the two major measures. Pipeline cover.
That's all you need.
100% is good. And are we producing the value every day that we need to, whether or not it's turning into orders won or not? So should we stop the podcast?
Stop there.
We can finish half time. Go on, let's carry on. Let's think of some others then. If you were to really measure your pipeline health, what else would you put on the list?
Well, I suppose the other thing we've done quite a bit on at the moment is win rates. Mostly because it's quite a cool little gauge visual in HubSpot. But more than that, it's about that's more about understanding why we're winning, why we're losing deals,
the reasons why.
Because then that's quite informative. In terms of, you don't want to stuff your pipeline, because I think there's that whole manage what you measure. So if you start measuring, well, that's just what's the value in the pipeline, you'll probably get a behavior of just all of a sudden loads of deals appearing. We've seen this before. Then all of a sudden you've got a lot of opportunities in the pipeline, maybe with
just padding it out,
rather fictitious amounts that might happen sometime in 2027 or something. But actually being able to look at by segment, so how do we win by stage of pipeline? How do we win based on what we talked about before, deal probability? Are we winning 50% of our 50% or 75% of our 75% and all those sorts of things? Maybe also look at it by size of deal. What sorts of, anything over X number of pounds, depending on your business.
Do you win the big deals and not the small ones? Or do you win the small ones and not the big ones? Or?
So having that understanding takes you to another level.
You just said just now, almost lost analysis. Why do we win? Why do we lose? And I think most people think about this backwards. So they wait till they've closed the deal. They then write down a reason maybe selecting from a list. Why did we lose it? Was it on price, delivery, capability, competitor, project didn't go ahead? All those sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
And then they produce that in a nice pie chart. And everybody goes, oh, that's pretty data. What are you going to do with that then?
Yeah.
We lose a quarter of our deals because of price. Is that a good thing? Maybe those people didn't understand that we were pitching a bit higher in the market and we weren't, whatever. So the way you've talked about just there, what we've described, is look at it the other way around. Choose attributes that you know about when a deal gets created.
Yeah.
Because then you can choose whether to carry on work. Because
doing it.
What's the behavior you're trying to do?
Yeah.
So like you say, if you do the win rate, if we win on average, we've got a client that wins about 40% of their deals, which I think is fantastic. It shows they're very strong in their market. They've got very high market share, 40% of all quotes. Now, you could say that's because they've been fussy in terms of which quotes they allow to get to that stage. And I've certainly heard that before.
Yeah.
Remember Sean, one of our clients, used to say, I only ever produce a quote if the buyer assures me that I'll win it if I produce it.
Yeah.
So that helped improve his win rates. But the idea is at the beginning, if you can see from your data in the past that all deals over £10,000 have got a 30% chance of being won, and all the ones under 10,000 have got a 50% chance of being won, then that maybe informs your decision about where to put your effort.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll find that the win rate of all your existing customers for on-sales is a lot higher than new customers. How much lower? That's the shocky bit. And I think sometimes people don't realize that the chance of winning a new customer when they come on can vary a lot. So it's choosing things that you can see at the beginning. Size of deal, who's the salesman, what's the product you're selling, which competitor are you up against, how long has the deal been alive for, all this sort of stuff.
And I suppose there's maybe a point on this, and it's not to beat anybody up, because I'm sure we could be plumber's tap on a bit of this, but it's...
Never,
exactly. But, and that was not supposed to be a clever little pun there, because we're talking about pipelines.
Oh, I didn't even spot that.
I thought afterwards, oh, she missed it there.
No pun intended, none taken.
I think with all these things is, can you talk about, I suppose the goal here is to be able to talk about these things almost fluently and know your data intimately. And so you can talk about, okay, well, we know we win this in this segment and not in this segment, and these are our win rates and this is our cover and all this. You can only do that if you have got the data there and it's visualized and it's there. It's amazing how many people you talk to and they just don't have these numbers on top of their heads.
No, true. And imagine if you could correlate that to something that you aren't doing but could do, like I'm thinking here, a decent qualification process.
Yeah.
Most every time a deal came on, you asked the same 4 questions, you scored them, and then after a period of time, you worked out whether I can tell whether I'm likely. What's the chance of me winning a deal based on what question, how the answers come across?
Yeah.
So you could save yourself a lot of time flogging dead horses, or at least focus on the ones that
or change it. If there's more lower value deals, is there a way of automating some of this, or is there a way of, I was even looking at that today for us. Some of the lower value things, can I just put a pay now on the quote, which you can do, and we need to,
just take the credit card payment.
Take the credit card payment, and just whoosh it through. So there's things like that you can start thinking then around process and around, well, how do we actually make this a better...
Well, that's Steve down in Bristol, who I was visiting, I think it was this week, wasn't it? It was earlier this week.
Yeah,
Monday. Went down there with Lewis. He's absolutely doing that. He's got a cut-off. He's got his top 100 customers. They all get the normal sales treatment and you invoice them and all that sort of thing. Anybody below the top 100 customers, then it's an e-commerce solution. Help yourself, self-serve. You can have anything you want, but you've got to pay up front.
Yeah.
Credit cards, please. Choose your own thing off the web and we'll sort it for you.
Sort it. Yeah.
So, good point. Change the win rates, not just manage around them. Good. Okay. I think you mentioned time to close before, didn't you? Just mention that just now.
Yeah.
I think that's useful in the context of stalled deals. So if you've got a reasonably well-defined pipeline, not just an opportunity identified, quote sent, one lost, pretty basic, but you've got enough stages in it, maybe 5 or 6 stages between op ID and win or lose, then you can start to look at how long it takes in each one of them. And if a job going through takes, I don't know, maybe more than twice the average time or something, you might declare that as stalled, put a flag on it, and then have that in your weekly sales meeting for a bit of attention. Is this deal actually going anywhere? Is there a reason why it's stalled? Is there, do we understand it? The other one that I thought was maybe more useful on that, because there will often be sometime very good reasons why a deal isn't moving as fast as others. Maybe the person inquiring just inquired sooner than they should have done
Yeah.
and the budget isn't ready yet or whatever, or they're waiting to build a new factory to put it in and the factory's been delayed, that type of thing. But another type of stall deal measure would be, when was the last time you had activity on this deal?
Yeah.
And it may not be spoken to the customer, the prospect. Maybe it is. Maybe you've had a meeting, maybe you've had an email from them. But maybe you just put a note on the file to say, I found out a bit more thing, I've looked online, I found that.
Yeah.
That's still activity.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when we look at some of our client data and indeed our own, Plumber's Tap again, that we've got some quotes out in the wild that we've not spoken to for over a month. Some of them, in some of our clients, not ours, over 2 months.
Yeah.
And you think, well, is that really not just a dead deal that you've not declared dead? Or is it one that needs a tickle every now and again?
Yeah.
Just check in. Are we still okay for this? And a great technique for that, and this won't be news to lots of dyed-in-the-wool salespeople, but if you make sure that there's some date by when something will change, maybe the prices are going to go up, or I just need to reissue the quote, especially for quotes that have already gone out, you can have an expiry date on the quote. Something that gives you an excuse to go back to someone and say, is this deal still live? Do you want me to close this off? And that's a technique I've used before. Just say, should I close this down? It'll stop me bothering you. Oh, no, we're still interested. Keep it open. It's just that
Reignite.
confirmation.
One thing I did see, and this is not so much the measures, but actually designing a pipeline, was to say, try and look at it from the perspective of what's happening with the customer rather than what's happening at your end in terms of process steps. So I suppose the stage that's contract sent is very much that's something you've done to send to them.
Yeah.
What are they doing? They're at deliberation, they're reviewing contract, aren't they? Contract being reviewed. And does that then...
So the words that you even describe each stage by would be how a customer would describe it, not how you would describe it.
Yeah, and then...
So reviewing contract as opposed to contract sent.
And then you might actually start thinking about, okay, well, what would I need to do if I'm reviewing a contract? What would that start, I think there's just something to think about.
That's a good point. So even opportunity identified, that's a very you perspective.
Yeah.
Made contact is their perspective, right?
Yeah. And so what are they? So if you took your pipeline, because I would imagine 95% of people have got it egocentrically done,
very good,
rather than customer centric, and think about how could you reverse that and map that, and then maybe think about, well, what would I want if I was in their shoes? What do they need? Do they need information? Do they need time? Do they need whatever it is? It's just a thought experiment.
And that leads on to another thought about, do you have stages in your pipeline which are holding stages? Because there are sometimes things that you need to do and sometimes you're just waiting.
Yeah.
And do you differentiate by using a different stage to say, this is now waiting between the stage 3 and stage 4.
Yeah.
I can't do anything. I've got to sit on it.
Yeah.
Look, there's loads more we could get through. And if we spend this long on each one, everyone will fall asleep. But there's a lot of good stuff in here. We talked about the stall deals.
Yeah.
Forecasts. Now, we didn't mention at the beginning here, but one of the best measures in the very short term is whether the deals that you've already won, what's the revenue forecast from those?
Yeah.
And we've done quite a bit of work on that. And we're putting enough data against the deals in HubSpot that we can now produce invoicing forecasts, revenue forecasts. And even for one client, we've done shipping forecasts, the quantities and the hours spent on the shop floor. So they're doing some rough cut capacity planning. Where's the demand coming through the shop floor based on what we've sold? But also win forecasts, and we've done some good charts there showing, are we likely to hit the order intake over the next few months based on how many deals we've got stacked by
up.
the percentages that they're going to be won. We talked about forecast accuracy.
Yeah.
Very good. And not just at the deal level, did you win the 50% jobs? But overall, if you forecast that you're going to bring in $1 million this month, how many times are you more than 10% away? New deal creation rate. That's another one. I put that in and lots of the clients we've worked at.
Yeah.
So what's the value of deals that have been created by month when they're created? And that obviously has to be some multiple, back to our pipeline cover thing again. Are we seeing the new ID? And that's often a good indicator where a company has got a bit too focused on the back end of the pipeline and they're chasing down lots of quotes sent or considering a quote, and they've forgotten to keep feeding the front end.
New logos. Well,
new logos, I love that phrase. So brand new companies as opposed to existing customers that are buying again. That's good, but that's key account management, right? New logos, real business development activity there.
And then looking at that by source, so inbound, outbound, referrals, part of our new 6-box model we're rolling out on the website. If you want to go and have a look at that.
That's good, on the 6-box model page.
6-box model of how to drive business growth. And
I wonder if I asked ChatGPT about Wellmeadow's 6-box model, whether it knows about it yet. And I don't know if you Google it, you get it. But
yeah, if you go on the website, we've got loads of free assessments on there as well, so you can actually do your own.
Yeah, lots of work gone into those. They look great.
So you can do your own assessment of where you're at with your outbound and your prospecting and your referrals, etc., etc.
So you talked about new logos there. We could talk about upsell, cross-sell, land and expand. So especially for bigger companies where you can sell to another department in the same company. Conversion rates, all the new lead to MQL, MQL to SQL, SQL to deal to customer. You should, and that's a good thing that I think a sales director should have those numbers, generally speaking, on tip of their tongue. Deal concentration. Now this was a great one for Glenn, wasn't it? It was on his just one thing, as well as a whole episode about this. If you've got too many eggs in one basket.
Exactly. So and I noticed we've got quite a neat little pie chart now on some of our deals I looked at today. I thought that's quite a good way of...
On the deal dashboard, shows you don't have to know all the detail of all the small slices. You just want to know how big is the biggest slice on the pie chart. And ideally, in my mind, I'd like to keep that below 10%. I think depending on your business, maybe 15. Yeah. That's where Glenn said, wasn't it? Try and keep it below 15. So if you lose your biggest customer, can you still survive?
You've got a chance, yep.
And then we talked a bit about lost analysis, lost reasons and stuff. So there's loads more we could do on that. And we haven't even gone into the longer term stuff around prospecting. Back to our 6-box model again. How many leads are we processing on a regular basis? Where do they tend to react? Where do we get the results from, and so on? So lots to do if you want to try and build all that. So we've got a few standard dashboards for this sort of thing. So if you're interested, give us a bell or come and have a look on the website, as we said before, and look at the 6-box model. Yeah. But we've got some examples on the back of that you can get from us. If you like, get in touch. That was useful though, wasn't it?
Cool, yeah.
I think we better go and fix that plumber's dripping tap now. I think we've got most of those, but we could do with maybe refreshing some of them.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's ever a static thing, is it? I think the more you learn, the more you need to feed. It's a feedback process, this.
You don't know what you don't know. You get the answer to one question, you think, oh, hang on, now I've got another question. I need to put that one on the dashboard.
And as you're learning and then building things in, and then, we've not talked about things like how do you help move some of these metrics, sales enablement, training, coaching. There's another podcast in that, isn't there?
Oh, that's good. Right, put that down for a future episode.
Along with my Wacklebees. Waggle dance.
And an update on your fire pit storytelling on the back of your Papua New Guinea life story. That reminds me of This Is Your Life. It's almost like your mum's Who was that, Eamon Andrews? That dates me. You don't know what I'm talking about.
I've got a clue.
Thank you again for putting up with us for another episode of the SME Growth Podcast. That was episode 127. Loads more in the back catalogue. Please have a look through. And if you've liked today's or any of the others, please tell your friends about it. Drop up an email or even give us a rating on wherever you get your podcasts from. Thanks again for listening and good luck with your business.